90 years ago, the Virginia Farm Bureau made our local farmers a promise to protect and preserve a way of life they work so hard to establish. Today, our insurance agents work to protect all Virginians, not just farmers. We want to keep Virginia, Virginia. More information is at farmbureauadvantage.com.
The remarkable soybean. From its oil, we get products like ink, candles, and paint. From its meal, we get a high-protein fiber used in foods and animal feeds. Natural soy is replacing chemicals and products you use every day. You can learn more about soybeans at vasoybean.com.
The Farm Bill is now in place, and many Virginia farmers want to know how it might possibly impact their farming operation. The new Farm Bill addresses the ongoing dairy crisis, and it also addresses industrial hemp production and rural broadband. We welcome Ben Rowe to our show this week to tell us all about it. Ben will join us during Ag Insights later in the program. We also have a story about how data from the Census of Agriculture will be used. Plus, we'll have some tips on managing a noxious plant called Tree of Paradise. Those stories and more on this episode of Virginia Farming. I'm Jeff Hische. Well, it won't be long until we see some solid numbers concerning agriculture in Virginia and the United States. The results of the 2017 Census of Agriculture are scheduled to be released starting on February the 21st. The census is conducted every 5 years, and it gives us valuable information about livestock production, labor, field crops, nursery operations, and many other aspects of agriculture. The data is used by educational institutions, financial organizations, as well as farm industry groups. Census data is also used to help local governments make important decisions about local agriculture. Well, cattle producers in Virginia and elsewhere know that branding is an important component of marketing. Bob Cervera is with the American Angus Association. He shares this story about an effort called Branding 40 Barns.
In 2018, the Certified Angus Beef brand created a year-long campaign called Brand the Barn to pay homage to its ranching roots while celebrating its first 40 years. 40 barns on Angus farms and ranches from coast to coast were selected from nominations to receive the iconic logo.
It's a 3-day process, so we arrive on site first day, basically kind of assess the barn, and we have photographs and everything kind of ready to go. So I know what the sizing is going to be and such. Every barn is different. You got wooden barns, you got metal barns, you got white barns, black barns, red barns. So just kind of getting the process down first. And then we're just working with the ranchers, getting all the equipment in the right place, making sure it's not raining, which it always rains, seems to be. That's just the luck of the draw. And getting the base painting up there, getting the logo drawn up and painted. Like I said, I'll paint it any time of day, any time of night. You got to get it done and on to the next one.
The artists had no prior farm background, but they picked up a lot just from visiting with Angus folks across the country. Then they shared insights with followers on social media.
I've learned weather is always going to be a factor no matter where you go, and everywhere you go is going to have some sort of crazy weather. I mean, hurricanes, hail, earthquakes, everywhere is different. But I will also say this, every family, no matter the background, no matter what, have been wonderful, hospitable, salt of the earth, good people, no matter the political backgrounds, no matter what. I was like, they've all been wonderful. I have never had such hospitality in all my life.
The logos vary in size and are creating plenty of dialogue and buzz, especially for Freeman, who has become a spokesman for CAB in his own right.
I've become pretty familiar with it. I don't think I could do all the proponents of what it takes to pass certification, but yeah, I mean, I get a lot of questions like, how do they do this? What is it? That type of thing. And I can answer the general questions. So.
The Brand the Barn campaign finished in Loudonville, Ohio, October 18th, 2018, in the same state and 40 years to the day after the first pound of CAB was sold. This year, Freeman will keep painting for the brand, but he'll turn his attention to projects for license partners. I'm Bob Cervera.
Thank you, Bob, for that report. Numerous farmers markets in Virginia are open throughout the winter. You might be thinking, what exactly might I find at a local farmer's market at this time of the year? Well, Virginia farmers are bringing in winter squash, cabbage, greens, carrots, and other fresh produce that can be produced in high tunnels or greenhouses. You'll also find local meats, eggs, and baked goods, all coming from Virginia farms. A directory of winter farmers markets can be found at the website virginiagrown.com. Farm safety specialists are advising drivers on rural roadways to be especially careful at this time of the year. Snow and ice make it challenging to drive on country roads, and farmers, they're still out there on rural roadways, feeding their animals and traveling from farm to farm. Now, if you do find yourself driving on a snow-covered country road this winter, be sure to just slow down. Black ice can form in shady spots and on bridges. And if you do get into some deep snow and get stuck, don't spin your wheels, as that only digs you in deeper. Well, this week we get an update and overview of the new Farm Bill. What does it mean to Virginia farmers? That's coming up next during Ag Insights. Hi everybody, and welcome to this episode of Virginia Farming. I'm Jeff Ishii. It's my pleasure to welcome to the program Mr. Ben Rowe. He is with Virginia Farm Bureau Federation. He works in national affairs. And Ben is going to bring us up to date on the recently passed Farm Bill. A lot of farmers across Virginia are not familiar with the Farm Bill, but it might impact your farming operation. Ben, it's a real pleasure to have you on our program today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, sure thing. So I work in Virginia Farm Bureau's Governmental Relations Department, and I cover state issues like energy and labor and plant-based commodities, as well as our national affairs issues out of Washington.
Now, the Farm Bill passed just before the holidays, and of course, during the holidays, we were all thinking about Christmas and New Year's and family and what we should be thinking about and finishing up the harvest from 2018. A lot of soybeans still out in the field, but the Farm Bill passed during a period that a lot of us, generally speaking, we weren't paying attention. So bring us up to date on what the Farm Bill means to Virginia agriculture.
Yeah, sure thing. So the 2018 Virginia Farm Bill has passed. It's about an $867 billion piece of legislation, and it impacts every aspect of agriculture across the country, as well as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or the SNAP program, which in fact impacts food assistance. It's
a very complex piece of legislation. A lot of it actually has nothing to do with production agriculture whatsoever.
True. About just shy of 80% does not actually impact the farming industry at all, but rather impacts nutrition assistance across the country.
Okay, the SNAP program, and that is many billions of dollars.
It is, yeah. So probably somewhere around 75–80% of the Farm Bill goes to nutrition assistance, and this is what was formerly known as the food stamp program that helps folks access healthy, domestically produced food across the country, whether that's in a grocery store, their local farmer's market, or anywhere else that accepts EBT.
2018, Ben, was a year that dairy farmers here in Virginia, many dairy farmers, they termed the year as a crisis. We lost a lot of dairy farms in 2018. Is there anything in the Farm Bill that addresses dairy farming?
Yeah, so the farm economy has really had a rough couple of years. We've seen farm incomes decrease by as much as 50% in some areas, and I agree, dairy is a crisis right now. In Virginia, we've lost about one dairy a week for a while now, and if you look across the country as a whole, that's a pretty average trend, and in some areas it's been even worse. So fortunately, the drafters of the Farm Bill have recognized this issue in the dairy industry and have done their best to try and address it by including several protections within the Farm Bill. They've allowed dairy farmers to access not only margin protection on their production, but also revenue protection. And these are two, you can call them safety nets, for when there are really hard times for dairy producers, to try and keep them in the industry so they don't lose their farm, so that in the future we have food security and access to domestically produced milk.
I understand toward the end of 2018, a program was announced that involved Virginia fluid milk going to food banks.
Yeah, so this is a milk donation program that was also outlined as part of the 2018 Farm Bill. It's a great program. It allows dairy producers to donate their surplus milk to food banks and other nutrition assistance programs and nonprofits. So this is not only a great thing for those in need, but also a great thing for farmers that have surplus milk. So rather than that milk spoiling and going to waste, it's going to help the needy.
We're talking with Ben Rowe with Virginia Farm Bureau Federation. And Ben, one of the hot topics really for the last couple of years, and it was addressed in the Farm Bill to my understanding, was the production of industrial hemp.
Sure.
Where do we stand in that process? And probably what the farmers would want to know is, does it pay? Is it profitable? And do you still need permits?
Sure. So short answer on the question about permits is yes. In Virginia, you still do need a permit. Virginia had an existing industrial hemp program that came out of the previous General Assembly session, and that was both for producers of industrial hemp as well as processors of industrial hemp. In the 2018 Farm Bill, there were some changes to industrial hemp, including the definition of hemp now being removed from the definition of marijuana under the Controlled Substances Act. Also, the federal government has sort of opened up the gate for states to allow hemp production. So what all of the states need to do now is to review any existing hemp program that they had and conform it with federal policy if they decide to be the regulatory body. So in Virginia, what this means is that now the Secretary of Agriculture and Forestry, the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, or VDACS as that's known, will partner with the governor's office as well as the Virginia State Police to review our industrial hemp program, ensure that it conforms with federal law, and make any changes that are necessary.
Let me ask you this, and it involves marijuana production. Of course, that's being discussed in Richmond. It's being discussed in Washington. A lot of states have now legalized marijuana. And a question I've been asked just in casual conversation, do I consider industrial hemp production as a gateway crop to commercial marijuana production? Where does Farm Bureau stand on that?
So Virginia Farm Bureau supports the production of industrial hemp, which is separate from marijuana. It does not contain the same active ingredients in marijuana that make it a drug. So industrial hemp is used for fiber production. So this goes into making things like cloth, rope, paper, animal bedding, as well as other products that you can extract from it. The state police and other regulatory authorities want to ensure that industrial hemp is produced in a way that is responsible and to ensure that folks aren't abusing that system to produce marijuana. And because of that, VDACS has the ability to come in and test your permitted industrial hemp crop to ensure that it doesn't have THC levels where it would fall under marijuana.
Sounds perfectly reasonable. And now on to another topic that I understand was addressed in the recently passed Farm Bill, and that is rural broadband. I think a lot of our viewers, a lot of our farmers would certainly understand they really need high-speed internet these days. And it's not just to sit around and Google corn yields all day.
That's right.
Their tractors are actually connected to the internet.
Yeah, they are. We've seen a great expansion of broadband in Virginia's urban and suburban localities, but we haven't seen that same pace of expansion and rollout in our rural areas. So because of that, rural Virginia is falling behind on access to rural broadband. And like you said, that's extremely important not only for farmers to be able to market their crop, to be able to follow commodity prices on a minute-by-minute basis and access new end users, but also a lot of this new modern equipment that's coming out, tractors, sprayers, etc., are what are called precision ag equipment, and they generate a vast amount of data. And farmers need to be able to collect this data, upload it, and analyze it so that they can use that precision ag data to not only improve their yields, improve their production, but also apply nutrients and crop protectants more accurately to lessen their impact on the environment. And without a broadband connection, you're unable to do that.
Without being too technical, is there a new technology coming that will allow this rural broadband, or is it simply more cell towers in more rural areas?
It's a little bit of both. And the analogy I like to use is if you look at the rollout of electricity and telephone in the previous century, you saw it happen first in urban and suburban areas, because if you run a mile of line in an urban or suburban area, you may have 10, 100, or 1,000 customers on that line. In a rural area, there are some farms where just the farm lane is a half-mile long. So you're talking about more infrastructure to serve fewer people, And sometimes the economics for that are very difficult, and that's where different state and federal run programs can be of assistance to try and get this rural broadband into the countryside.
Well, it sounds like the 2018 Farm Bill is going to be, for the most part, beneficial to production farmers here in the Commonwealth of Virginia and nationwide. And I'd like to wrap up our discussion here today and talk about the importance of what Farm Bureau does here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It is known as a grassroots organization. The farmers meet within their county, and then they come convene together at a convention, and all of this policy is created from the grassroots level.
It is, absolutely. So we represent 88 different counties across Virginia, and like you said, we go through a process where all of these counties can generate issues of local interest. We can come together as a statewide organization and focus on the issues that are important to all of us across the Commonwealth to ensure that we're well represented. And we also represent agriculture in the Virginia State House as well as in D.C. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the Farm Bill. In order to fund these Farm Bill programs, Congress has to appropriate dollars, and it is important that farmers have a voice in government to ensure that these programs that can help farmers can get off the ground, receive funding, and do good.
If farmers have an idea on a policy issue, what would you recommend that they do?
I recommend that they go to their local county farm bureau and bring this up in the form of a resolution that can be considered by that board and then move up to our statewide Farm Bureau board.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for being a guest on Virginia Farming, Mr. Ben Rowe with Virginia Farm Bureau. He's brought us up to speed on the 2018 Farm Bill, which is now a law. Back in just a moment. Well, many Virginians are familiar with a plant called the paradise tree. If you have it, you know it. We learn all about this invasive plant as we go in the garden with Mark Viette.
When you're traveling down the interstates, you might see this tree behind me. It can get 80 feet tall. This tree was brought into the United States to become a quick-growing shade tree. You know, they needed to bring in trees. This is one that was recommended. It, at that point in time, was called the tree from heaven. It's also known as a Chinese sumac, and botanically, it's known as Ailanthus altissima. But we're finding out it's probably not the tree from heaven. It's a tree from somewhere else. This tree produces seed pods that spread all over. And it is a tree that really has given problems to farmers. It grows along fence rows, and it spreads very quickly, and it is difficult to eliminate. I'll tell you, you would think by looking at this tree, well, I'll come in and I'll cut it down. Cutting it down makes it worse, and I'll show you in a minute what that does. But this tree comes up, it has roots that go out 20 or 30 feet or more. The roots almost produce something similar to what black walnuts do. It is a hormone that prevents other plants from growing well. This does look like a black walnut, so you do need to be sure if you're trying to get rid of this noxious tree that you're not getting rid of some of the sumacs and you're not getting rid of black walnut. Let me show you what this tree does when you try to cut it down. Last year, I started resurrecting an old vegetable garden, trimming the garden, trimming some of the trees, and lo and behold, right in the front here, I have this so-called tree from heaven. That tree there is probably about 5 years old. What I did last year was prune some of the side branches and little trunks so I could have an easier time cutting it to the ground. What I found this year was all the way out here and beyond me, all these shoots are coming up from the roots. So if we had 8 or 9 long roots produced from this tree, all along each of those roots, there are new shoots coming up. Right in front of me here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 new shoots coming out into growth from this tree here. What does make it a little difficult is if you need to treat this tree, which we'll talk about in a minute, with a weed killer, and once you've cut the tree, there's no way to treat these little new shoots, so you have to individually treat each of them. This is a tree that I really don't recommend for our gardens. It is not the tree from heaven. And if any of you have this on a property that you have, you'll realize that soon. This spring I was looking for a workout, so I decided to go out in the garden and hand dig these tree from heavens. What I found is that where I dug this young tree from, again, 12 feet from the tree, all these shoots started popping up. And this is a young one. 2 years ago, I pruned a tree about this size, and I cut it in 8-foot lengths. I laid the logs on the ground, and the logs started sprouting new shoots. This tree is something that none of us really want in our garden. And there's only a couple ways probably you want to deal with this tree, and I just recommend that you go online to find specific chemicals, but pretty much if you tried to remove this even with a backhoe, all the roots are going to produce new plants. So what you're going to want to do is treat this tree with a recommended chemical that not only kills the tree part you see here, also kills the trunk and also kills the roots from the trunk. And you can find that out by going online. You can also find that out by going to garden stores, and they'll give you the recommended products. But again, you want to spray it, and some people have bark treatments, some people have stump treatments, but you want to eliminate it first. And keep in mind, many weed killers work the best in the fall. In the spring, all the nutrients and all the sugars that have been stored all spring long flow upward into the tree. But in the fall, all the nutrients and sugars that have been produced by this tree travel down and go into the roots. So if you're treating it with a product, the product can go farther out into the roots and give you less problems into the future. I'm going to tell you, I don't think this is the tree from heaven. This is the tree from hell. I'm Mark Viette. Join me next time in the garden.
You may have some extra time for reading this winter. If so, you may want to check out this new book about communicating with chickens. Backyard chickens are more popular than ever. Thousands of families all across Virginia, they keep a few hens for a variety of reasons. Fresh eggs, insect control, and just the sheer pleasure of keeping chickens. But have you ever wondered about chicken language? A new book from writer Melissa Caughey examines why your chickens do what they do and say what they say. The book is entitled How to Speak Chicken and was released by Story Publishing in 2017. Now, if you're a newcomer to keeping poultry, this book will provide knowledge on understanding chicken body language, flock etiquette, and the emotional life of chickens. For instance, what makes a hen broody? Is that a good thing, a bad thing, or just a thing? What exactly is it that makes a rooster crow? Do roosters crow only in the morning? How about pecking order in the flock? How and when is it determined? One chapter is devoted solely to the topic of the emotional life of chickens. Can chickens become jealous? And do chickens enjoy playing games? All of these topics and more are discussed with colorful illustrations, helping small flock owners to learn what makes a chicken tick. Caughey says chickens, they speak volumes if you just know how to listen. Once again, the book is entitled How to Speak Chicken. It's softbound, contains 144 pages, and was written by Melissa Caughey and published by Story Publishing. Our pearl of wisdom this week comes from Junior Hewitt in Stanton, who says, "If you take care of the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves." That does it for our show this week. Have a great week, everyone. I'm Jeff Ishii for Virginia Farming. And now for your Ag Trivia question of the week, the answer when we return.
90 years ago, the Virginia Farm Bureau made our local farmers a promise to protect and preserve a way of life they work so hard to establish. We want to keep Virginia, Virginia. Anyone can be a Farm Bureau member, and there's a local Farm Bureau in every county. More information is at vafarmbureau.org.
Virginia soybean farmers are hard at work growing soybeans to produce products you use every day. Candles, soaps, even crayons can be made from soybeans. Remember, when you buy soy, you're helping to support American jobs, the economy, and our nation's energy security.
And now the answer to your ag trivia question of the week. B, the leading county in Virginia for corn production is Accomack.